demoralizing effect.
Oh, really?
I admit at times it was quite a struggle, but...
Like when?
Well, twice to be exact.
Danny Kaye was the entertainer who always seemed larger than life, his effervescent grin and quick-fire comedic timing bewitching audiences worldwide. But behind that smooth showman's facade lurked a far more complicated reality, one marred by harsh childhood abuse, questions about his private life, and a penchant for pushing his body and mind to the brink. He soared to stardom in Hollywood and on Broadway, all while battling secrets that threatened to consume him. Today, we're uncovering the controversies, heartbreaks, and triumphs that shaped Danny Kaye, the man behind the showbiz legend. From the outside, Danny Kaye's upbringing seemed ordinary enough. He was born in Brooklyn to Ukrainian Jewish immigrants, and his family eked out a living, hoping for that classic American dream. But for young Danny, life at home was anything but comfortable. He faced relentless ridicule and severe discipline at the hands of both his father and brothers, turning his childhood into a cycle of fear. His coping mechanism was humor. He quickly discovered that making people laugh could diffuse tension, and that became his armor. Each well-timed joke or silly impression at the family dinner table offered him a fleeting reprieve from verbal jabs or rough treatment. At the time, his comedic gift was simply a way to survive. Little did he know that this gift for making others smile under duress would become his defining characteristic, and also, in some ways, his curse. It's a pattern that would follow him into adulthood, that desperate need to please, to perform, and to hide any real vulnerability behind the next gag or grin. His comedic genius may never have emerged without those early hardships, but the psychological toll stayed with him for life. By his teens, Danny's comedic streak was in full bloom. No classroom could contain his hyperactive imagination for long, and teachers found it nearly impossible to get him to sit still. In fact, formal education never really fit him. He dropped out of school and relied on everyday experience to guide him. Eventually, his raw talent catapulted him from local clubs to bigger stages and, later, Hollywood. He was a whirlwind of physical comedy, baffling accents, and sprightly singing routines. Audiences fell in love with his boundless energy. No matter how silly or slapstick he got, it always seemed purposeful. Like every pratfall and nonsense word was part of an elaborate dance only he truly understood. Yet behind the curtain, Danny remained the kid who had learned to diffuse danger with comedic flair. In an industry where confidence is currency, he overcompensated with a bottomless reservoir of jokes, funny voices, and impromptu dance moves. No one saw the insecurity fueling his tireless work ethic because he masked it so well. He'd step off stage with a quick bow and an even quicker exit, seeking refuge from the audience's clamor, an applause he craved, yet also feared. Curiously, Danny Kaye didn't just limit his energies to performance. It was as if once he set his mind on a goal, he wouldn't let anything stop him. With no college degree or formal training, he became an accomplished pilot, eventually qualifying to fly nearly every kind of civilian aircraft available at the time. Even more baffling, he never actually learned to read music, yet he famously conducted symphony orchestras, and seemed to do so with professional aplomb. His kitchen escapades became legend, too. He became infatuated with Chinese cuisine and, through sheer determination, earned a reputation as one of the best non-Asian Chinese chefs in the world. Friends joked that if he got a sudden passion for golf, he'd be winning championships within a year. He was that driven, but it was a double-edged sword. Everything had to be perfect. He would obsess over the smallest details until his abilities dazzled or even intimidated onlookers. This insatiable hunger for mastery was another reflection of his need for control, a desire to prove, perhaps to himself, that there was nothing he couldn't conquer. In a public sense, it was all spectacular. Kaye's fans saw him as a sort of Renaissance man, someone who could dabble in any art or craft and excel. But the same internal fire that pushed him to succeed also fueled the anxieties that kept him up at night. And if there was one area where those tensions shone brightest, it was in his relationships.
Tested, and they come up with a thermometer.
Oh,
And depending on how nice you are to them is where they...
On screen, Danny Kaye often played the bumbling, sweet-hearted fellow, too shy to handle the glamorous leading ladies. Off-screen, however, he had a reputation for being far from timid. Affairs with well-known stars like Eve Arden or Shirley MacLaine stirred up Hollywood chatter. He was said to have swept numerous women off their feet, and none of these romantic episodes went unnoticed by his wife, Sylvia Fine. Sylvia was more than just a spouse. She was also an accomplished composer who crafted much of the material that made him famous. Professionally, they needed each other. Despite his dalliances, he always circled back to Sylvia, who believed their creative bond was unbreakable. Perhaps that dynamic was enough to keep their marriage intact, if only on the surface. Then came the rumors about Sir Laurence Olivier. A biographer claimed Kaye and the esteemed British actor were entangled in a long-running affair. The mere suggestion sent shockwaves through conservative circles of the time. Fans and tabloids speculated wildly, though hard evidence was never produced. Those close to Danny argued that the rumors were exaggerated or rooted in misunderstandings. Kaye himself rarely addressed the matter publicly, a silence that only fueled more questions. To his defenders, these allegations were preposterous, the result of an overly imaginative biographer seeking to sell books. But whether you believe the stories or not, the topic remains one of the most puzzling chapters of Danny Kaye's legacy, an enigma echoing his own self-contained, guarded life. The cheerful man on the screen belied someone constantly at war with his own mind. Behind his effortless performances lay hours spent in intensive psychotherapy. Throughout most of his career, Kaye routinely worked with renowned mental health professionals, trying to untangle the insecurities and looming darkness that haunted him. He suffered from episodes of severe depression, states of loneliness so profound that he sometimes made snap decisions to flee his surroundings. Friends recall impulsive late-night calls, "Pack your bags, we're leaving now." Off they'd fly to Havana or Las Vegas, with Kaye chasing a short-lived escape from his own thoughts. These trips frequently involved partying, dancing, and fleeting companionship. But by morning, he'd be back on a plane to his next show, rarely mentioning the whirlwind night before. No matter how skilled a performer he was, Danny couldn't entirely outrun the shadows of his past. In many ways, his comedic onslaught became his emotional fortress. Where other artists might pause for reflection, Kaye pressed forward with jokes and routines. Laughter for him wasn't just entertainment, it was a survival strategy. Yet the cracks in that foundation began to show. The more he achieved, the more he felt compelled to maintain an illusion of perfection, and any slip threatened to blow the lid off his carefully contained anxieties. That lid eventually burst during his Broadway run in the musical 2x2. Partway into the production, Danny broke his leg, forcing him to perform from a wheelchair. This sudden loss of physicality, his trademark comedic style relied heavily on movement, seemed to ignite all his pent-up insecurities. Instead of gracefully adapting his stage act, he channeled his frustration into erratic behavior. He began to veer off script, tossing out random jokes that had nothing to do with the show. Cast members became targets for pranks mid-performance, and he'd drop character on a whim. The audience at first was amused. After all, Danny Kaye was known for spontaneity. But it soon spiraled out of control, undermining the entire production. Tensions backstage reached a boiling point as fellow performers struggled to keep up with his unpredictable antics. For the first time, Kaye's comedic gifts appeared burdensome, even destructive. His meltdown wasn't just physical, it was emotional, the result of years spent trying to outrun his own vulnerabilities. When the show's financier, Richard Rodgers, finally recouped his investment, Danny walked away, leaving 2x2 in the dust. His abrupt departure rattled Broadway, staining his once unassailable reputation. People in theater circles whispered about his mental state, wondering if the comedic giant had finally buckled under decades of hidden pressure.
Now comes the first movement. Presto vivace, argumento molto, contabile molto, chocolo molto. And we have the first team.
Despite his struggles, Danny Kaye channeled a significant portion of his energy into humanitarian work. He became the very first ambassador at large for UNICEF, traveling the globe to advocate for children in need. For years, he threw himself into philanthropic causes, earning honors like the French Legion of Honor in recognition of his tireless efforts. On these missions, people witnessed a softer side of Kaye, someone genuinely moved by the plight of children, determined to make a difference where he could. Yet the complexities never faded. In his later years, he faced heart troubles that would eventually take his life. In 1983, a quadruple bypass surgery provided a temporary reprieve, but lingering complications, including hepatitis C from a blood transfusion, caught up with him. On March 3, 1987, Danny Kaye died at the age of 76. The end came from heart failure exacerbated by internal bleeding, closing the chapter on a life both brilliant and fraught with turmoil. In death, Kaye left behind a complicated legacy. Comedic classics like White Christmas and The Court Jester remain beloved by film fans, even as his name has grown less familiar to younger generations. Some of his television work now appears dated, though pockets of fans still treasure his unique comedic flair. The synergy between him and his wife Sylvia produced some of the mid-20th century's most memorable comedic moments. But behind those moments lay personal heartbreak, rumor-laden headlines, and emotional scars. Danny Kaye's existence was a story of extremes. He brimmed with seemingly boundless energy, conquering comedic routines, dance sequences, and unexpected passions that showcased his voracious drive. Yet in equal measure, he bore the weight of an agonizing past he could never fully shake. The paradox is impossible to miss. A man devoted to making the world laugh, while silently wrestling with inner turmoil that sometimes spilled onto the stage. Even today, Hollywood legends are often reduced to highlights, glamorous photos, iconic films, or show-stopping performances. For Danny Kaye, those remain only part of the narrative. Behind his effortless grin stood a resilient but fragile soul whose relentless ambition led him to dazzling achievements and monumental stumbles. Perhaps that's the legacy he leaves us, the reminder that brilliance and pain can coexist, and sometimes the greatest entertainers carry the heaviest burdens. Were you familiar with the many sides of Danny Kaye's life? Let us know your thoughts and whether you have a favorite Danny Kaye performance or rumor below. And remember, behind every legend's laughter often lies a story far more complex than the one we see on screen.